As we, talk about baked goods, which is always a great way to start any conversation. um, but yeah, welcome to week 2 of September and week 2 of resilience. Um, it's been a crazy few days, despite it being a short week. Yesterday was interesting, and this topic was really in the forefront of my mind as the craziness ensued throughout the day. Uh, yeah, we're definitely kind of leaning on being resilient to snap back from all the interesting the things that pop up. The random emails and link messages. But definitely was thinking about today's session and um, how resilience really highlighted itself during a couple of interactions, at least from my end, communication wise. So, a lot of times when we're interacting with people, and I guess, we can all relate to the work environment, where there's going to always be situations that are slightly more challenging than normal. And resilience always raises its wonderful head, doesn't it? And kind of supports us in one understanding. This is just work. There's nothing to get too bogged down about. But for us to really be able to see things holistically, if you know what I mean. I know we kind of touched on this last week, but resilience has really been highlighting its ability to be almost like a drone, if I could use that as an example, and kind of raising you up above a situation and giving you that chance to see things from a different perspective. And, you kind of see all the pieces of the puzzle, and it gives you that ability to, I guess, open your eyes to alternatives. Sometimes you're at loggerheads with someone or with some situation, but that resilience, and with practice this becomes easier, but it really helps you put yourself in someone else's shoes, and understand where's that person coming from. So pieces of empathy and compassion, and all those little bits and pieces that come together and make resiliency. And that really highlighted itself to me yesterday, where I had a couple conversations with individuals. And this whole conversations piece kept showing itself to me. And when I started to think about that, I really wanted to share it with you guys within the context of martial arts, interestingly enough. So, you guys may not know, but Japanese culture has been something that I've always really been interested in, and the samurai culture. And so kind of by association, martial arts as well. But there is a type of martial art, and you guys may or may not have heard of it, called Aikido. And it's kind of translates into the art of peacemaking. And it really prides itself in kind of having, so the person that created it had studied other forms of martial arts that existed at the time, so in the mid 1800s. And he came up with this form called the art of peacemaking, where it really looks to avoid violence at all costs. The resolution to an issue should be as nonviolent as possible. And it has a lot of resonance with communication. And if you think about it, when you have, let's say, an altercation or a conversation that can escalate into an altercation, a lot of times we'll either submit and say, okay, fine, you're right, to avoid arguing, or you'll go in really aggressively and try to overpower the other person. Those are those are the two that we tend to fall into a lot of times. There is the other option, though, and that's to enter in with the understanding, or with the kind of extending that olive branch to say, let's work on this together, and let's try to be on the same team rather than opposing one another. And that's where Aikido sort of comes in and really pushes us to, again, promote that resiliency of being able to see issues, etc., from another person's perspective. And there's actually, it's been broken down, like the process of using Aikido in communication has been broken down into 4 steps. And I will share that in the meeting invite, but I don't want to go into it too much because I'll probably talk your ear off. But the basic premise is approaching a conversation with the intention of aligning with the other person. So you step in with the intention of being in the other person's shoes, understanding the situation, using mindful listening to really listen and understand what the other person is feeling, connecting with it, if possible, and then working together to resolve it. And you can see where resiliency really comes in, because you need to have that ability to be flexible with somebody, to be able to find alternatives and find workarounds, compromise, and then commit with the other person to find a resolution. And it's not only another person, though. It's also with yourself. These apply to yourself too. Bringing it back to mindfulness when you're practicing. This is very key when you are coming face to face with the wild things, as we were talking about last week, the wild things that pop up in your head. You don't want to go at it aggressively and try to push them out of your mind. You don't want to submit to those thoughts because then your mindfulness will be sucked away and you get caught up in the thoughts in your head. But you want to approach those thoughts and those emotions or any interaction and align yourself with it and understand where it's coming from. So it's not a push or pull. It's a very neutral approach. And hopefully what I'm saying kind of makes sense to you guys in terms of like day-to-day interactions, as well as, applying it to your mindful practice. Does it make sense? Or is it sounding a bit confusing? Just want to get it. You can totally type yes in the chat if it makes sense to you guys. Trying to make it as easy to understand as possible, or make sense in terms of mindfulness, because a lot of times we can get swept up in our thoughts, and so it's a nice it's a different way of approaching these thoughts. Yay, Tina understands. Okay, awesome. Woo. Thanks for confirming, you guys. But yeah, I mean, hopefully I'll try to explain it a little bit more in the invite, so that you can kind of read about it and understand what I'm trying to say. But hopefully it's quite a very straightforward concept in that, you just don't want to go in submissive, or you don't want to go in aggressively. You want to go in neutrally and be open-minded about any interaction, especially with yourself. And that kind of resonates with the compassion and empathy pieces that we've been speaking about before as well. So hopefully when you guys are practicing, even if it's for 5 minutes, you bring that perspective with you as well. So hopefully, that will help with any recurring thoughts that maybe aren't as pleasant, or things that you kind of don't want to face. Those can be really challenging, and I completely understand that. So if you can try this method as well, where you're trying to align yourself and approach with that olive branch of saying, okay, I'm going to work with you, meaning yourself, on these thoughts, and I'm not going to cling to them. I'm not going to reject them. I'm just going to let them be and let them flow through. Kind of like a guest coming to your house. They don't stay. You're not going to tie them to a chair. You're going to let them come in, walk around, have a glass of wine, maybe some crackers, and then leave. So same concept. You let your thoughts come in, you have a chat, you say, great, nice to meet you, and let it go. And that kind of process takes time, but it gets easier and easier, guaranteed. I'm glad you appreciate that comparison. It always helps, I always try to see your mind as a house, and the door's always open. You don't want to close the door, because then, everything gets trapped inside. Keep that door open, and anything will come and go as it pleases, and you are the non-judgmental observer, extending that olive branch of neutrality, shall we say, olive branch of neutrality. But yeah, I thought that was definitely something I really, really wanted to share with you guys. So appreciate the individuals I had conversations with yesterday, because they prompted this thought process. So thanks to them too. Yeah, I mean, did you guys have any questions or comments on Aikido or this kind of way of thinking? Well, yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. That's so true. Yeah, whatever. I love how you said that. Whatever is inside will reflect on the outside. You're so right. And I'm sure we all notice that. Like when you're talking to somebody, you can just feel when there's a chaotic energy or there's a calm energy, isn't it? You can really pick that up if you're paying attention, and it's sometimes for some people it's very obvious, and yet for others it's a little bit more subtle. But totally agree with you. And you can't fake it either, can you? If you haven't put in that work, you can kind of put a mask on and pretend things are good, but eventually, it kind of bubbles to the surface and becomes a bigger issue that, you could have kind of resolved sooner. But that's the kind of pathway that we're all on, isn't it? We're just trying to develop that sense of self-awareness, and that, extension of the olive branch with neutrality to ourselves and to others. And it's not an easy it's not an easy process. Just like, we were talking about the wild things last week. It is something that really does come up, and it can be constant. It is a lifelong process. Yes, Leah, 100%. It's always flexing and changing. And even in the points, the 4 steps, the last step is resolve. And resolving that sort of, or assuming that the two of you, if you're in a conflict or in a conversation, resolve doesn't mean that you've both come to a resolution. It just means that, the person that you're talking to, or you with yourself, are kind of in alignment or facing the same direction. You kind of agree that, okay, we think this is the right direction we should go in to get to a resolution. But even that can ebb and flow and change at the turn of a hat, the drop of a hat, not turn of a hat, drop of a hat, things change. And you need to have that resiliency to change along with it. And so I think the work environment really helps us do that, because there's a lot of times where you have to know, you can't always be 100% expressive with how you feel. You are at work, so there are going to be moments where you have to step back, take a moment, and reassess before you say anything or before you do anything. So it's a really great environment to practice this process, where approaching a meeting, approaching a one-on-one that you're having, even, or a coffee chat, a career development discussion, all of that stuff. Or maybe you're having issues with a fellow colleague, anything. It's really beneficial when you approach that, or approach that individual with that mindset of alignment, because you're not starting off on the wrong foot, of an aggressive foot or a submissive one. So, you're more likely to have a productive discussion with the other individual because you're coming in with that olive branch of neutrality. So discussion can ensue and you can have a more fruitful conversation, and probably a more honest one too, because no one's defensive. So if you can see this whole concept of Aikido and being the art of peacemaking really couples nicely with resiliency, and in the workplace, and hopefully in your mindful practice too. Unfortunately, we didn't get to do the practice today, but my intention is actually next week for us to actually have a session for practice itself. So we will spend more time with that. But this week I really wanted to highlight this concept to you guys and give you a chance to think about it. And then when you go home, or when you are home, when you're off work and you practice, try approaching the thoughts that come into your mind with that neutral stance and see if it helps. I can share from my experience. I have a lot of thoughts from the past, when I was a lot younger. Those tend to come out in my mind. And it's so challenging to sort of sift through and move past it sometimes. And you can, or at least I can sense that frustration that comes up a lot of time. And I don't know if you guys experience this as well. Maybe there's certain thought patterns that come up, or you notice certain themes that keep coming into your mind. And see if you have that sense of frustration that comes too. It's like, oh, not again. I thought I dealt with this last time. Or even, oh, I'm so glad that this is coming again. Make note of those things, because as part of the practice, you also want to see what your reaction is too, right? You don't want to push or pull. You always want to stay in that neutral ground, because having that mindful view as you're looking at your mind and your thoughts, the key is neutrality. We don't cling to, or we don't push away. Like, again, those thoughts are the guests that come into your mind. They come in, say hello, have that wine and cheese, and then they leave. And so the same concept. You want it to be a nice little ebb and flow. They come in and they go out. And that neutrality will help you deal with whatever is coming in to your mind. Some guests kind of overstay, totally get that. We all have the guests that want to stay a little longer than necessary, but eventually they leave too. And having that alignment and neutrality definitely helps deal with it, and helps that process of letting your thoughts leave as well. And I hope that you guys see that in your practice. And if not to worry, it will come. It's a lifelong, as Leah definitely said, it's a lifelong process that we're constantly adjusting to. Nothing is permanent. The mind is always changing too. And we're always adjusting ourselves to new situations and new people. So new thoughts come up, new things come up for us to deal with. So it is indeed a lifelong process. But again, deal with it and accept all of that with compassion for yourself, because it's a hard thing that you're doing. Mindful practice is challenging, no doubt. Wonderful benefits, but challenging. So the fact that you guys are trying is just a reward enough. So keep doing it. Don't be discouraged if it's hard. Absolutely, Bernadette. It does get better with more practice and more time. 100% agree with you. And you start to learn so much about yourself too, about your own resiliency. So I do hope that you keep up with the practice. And as promised, next week, we're definitely spending more time with the practice. So be ready to do a bit more yoga and practice next week. So definitely promising you guys on that. But I hope today was interesting. And I hope that you guys took something away from Aikido. And I will definitely write up a bit more about it and share some links so that you guys can investigate it a little bit more. But until then, I hope that you guys continue your practice and continue your resiliency. And I hope that you have a wonderful rest of the Wednesday and rest of the week. And as always, appreciate that you guys join every morning. It's always nice to see your names pop up on the screen.